G'day, welcome to Payitforward. Today I have a quick project for you all. I get so many requests for clothing for my patterns, for my art dolls and for our bears and animals right here on Payitforward. Now, all of you who follow me will know that I love cardies on my creations, and hand knitted cardies, if you don't knit, of course, you know, that's difficult. I don't knit, I actually get mine knitted for me. And they can be hard to find, so I thought I would come up with an alternative that still has all that sweetness and softness. So this is what I've come up with, and it's made up out of fleece, so it's very inexpensive. You can change this pattern up, you can enlarge it, you can decrease it when you go to print it out, and you're going to have so many options with it, and it is just so sweet. I would wear this one. I would totally wear this one. I'm even thinking of making a little vest for myself in the same fabric. Anyway, that's for another day. But you have your free pattern down in the description box below. Just click on that link and you'll be able to print out your pattern templates. Follow the blurb that I put on there and make sure you watch your marker. You've got a marker on every page of your pattern templates that makes sure that you're getting your pattern pieces correct. Let me show you how quick and easy this little jacket is. So let's run through what we're going to need to put a little basic boxy cardigan together. I'm using fleece. Now I really recommend you use fleece for this project. You can certainly make it up in perhaps a wool flannel, a pure wool flannel, something like that, wool blanketing. Just remember, if you're going to use wool blanketing or something that frays, you are going to have to overlock your edges first. We don't have to do that with fleece because it doesn't fray away. I like the fleece because it's so soft and it sort of imitates a knitted cardigan. That's why I've gone for that. And it comes in so many incredible colours and it's very inexpensive. Alright, so we're going to start. We have our back piece, we have our two front pieces. We've got our sleeves, and I add two little pockets. Now this is optional, and I like to add a little bit of detailing on those pockets. In this case, I am going for a beautiful just applique daisy. You can certainly do anything you like there. We do have a facing that goes from the front all the way around the neck, so it has a beautiful finish, but it's very easy. And I also add in a little tie at the top. So I've just strung a few little beads that are going to work with the colours of my project. We're going to be inserting this braided cord right in the corner here and here between the facing and the front pieces. So it's going to tie up beautifully, and then these two will sit down the front. It's a great opportunity to add a little bit more detail. We will be blanket stitching some of this. You can blanket stitch all of the edges when you're done, which is what I'm going to do. You don't have to. Otherwise you can just hem it up and leave it just hemmed up, and I may even do the cuffs with some blanket stitching. We certainly will be blanket stitching around those pockets. Now I am probably going to use my 8-ply Perle Thread for my blanket stitching. I just prefer working with that, but you could use for the outer edge the 5-ply, because it's got a little bit more weight to it, and it would certainly be fine around your outer edges, but I do think I'm going to use this one. Okay, so to start with, let's move everything out the way, and we are going to start with our front and back pieces. We are going to put right sides together, and we're going to sew the shoulder seams first up. So make sure they're beautifully aligned. Your seam allowance throughout this project is 5 millimeters. It's quite small, but it means that we don't have bulk in the seams, considering it's a very thick fabric. So we're going to stitch across, make sure you back and forth on your start and finish, and then we're going to turn that one through and flatten out that seam. You can press it. If you are going to press your fleece with your iron, make sure you use a protective cloth. So I have gone ahead and lightly pressed those seams, shoulder seams open and flat. So it just means adding the facing is easier and everything sits better. So that's how our little jacket will look. Now, I go ahead and I add the pockets at this stage, because once we go and add the facing, it's much more difficult to do it after that. So, and I've changed my mind, as I'm known to do. I've changed my mind. I'm actually going to add 2 little applique hearts. I am fanatical about love hearts. Drives Mr. T crazy because he doesn't like them. I don't know why he doesn't like them, but he doesn't. So that's what I'm going to do, still working with my whole plan. Okay, now, first thing I do with these pockets is I just turn under the top edge, and it's about just under 1 centimetre, and stitch across. I didn't tell you before, but when you're working with fleece like this that's fairly thick, up your stitch length on your machine to about a number 3, it will cope with it much better. So those are ready to go. What I'm going to do is I'm going to press on those little hearts, mine are fusible, and I'm going to stitch around them so they're nicely done. Then, once that's done, I'm going to line these up, and I'm going to stitch just about with a 4 to 5 millimetre seam allowance. I'm going to stitch those pockets in place. Just make sure that they're the same on each side, remembering that your coat, your little jacket sits like this, so make sure that they're both positioned the same. And then I'm going to stitch them on. Once that they're stitched on, I can then sew my blanket stitch around the outside edge, and I've got a lovely guide to help me. So let me get that done. First of all, my heart's in place. You can use any embellishments you like, or maybe none at all. And then I will get those pinned into place. Now you do have to remember when you're positioning those pockets that you've got a seam happening here and a hem, so you don't want them too low down. I would suggest from the edges around about 2.5 or 1 inch from here, and they'll sit perfectly. So with my pockets in place here, you can see that I've gone ahead and I've sewn my blanket applique stitch around the first one. I'm going to show you how I do that. I also have a video here on my channel that shows you how to sew the blanket applique stitch, and I show you really up close. I'm going to show you a few stitches here though. So, and mine is a variegated thread, and that works really well with my project, so I'm glad I've gone with that. So with the blanket applique stitch, we are stitching around the outer edge of a shape that we've added to our fabric. So we come up on the outside edge of that shape. I've got a single strand of thread, and I have just a knot in the middle, in the end of my thread. I'm going to come in and I'm going to bring my needle out basically where I started. And bring my needle through the loop. And that's going to make my first stitch there. And then I'm going to continue in and bring my needle out at the edge, and I'm taking some of that underside fabric as well. Making sure to place that stitch each time. That's my second stitch. I'm keeping them quite small, nice and even. So each time you're just bringing your needle out through the thread loop, and that gives you that lovely binding stitch around the whole edge of the shape. This is how we sew on any kind of applique pieces as well. And you can see I've got that lovely little stitch with that bound edge, so we won't have a raw edge anymore. So I'm just going to make my way right the way around to the other side. So with our pockets done, our next step is to add our facing. Before we do that, we're going to take our little tie pieces, and I'm going to stitch them just almost a centimetre from this top edge. I'm just going to stitch within the seam allowance on my machine, just so that they're nicely tucked in there before we add our facing because then it will be nicely sandwiched in between those two layers. I do turn my stitch length down a little to do that. I'll just go back and forth a couple of times. The length of the ties, I've made about 26 centimetres each tie, and that gives you enough of a bow and it'll sit down to about here. So I have those two pieces joined in the top corners there, and we're going to go ahead and add our facing. So adding our facing, we are putting right sides together, and I like to line it up this way, and I like to clip in first these top corners. I'm going to really pull that cord down out of the way, and I'm going to clip these into place, each corner, pulling that down. And then you'll find that everything else is going to line up and match up perfectly. Same on the other side. And then we follow it up all the way around the neckline. And again, you're going to find it's just going to fit beautifully. Just going to clip that all the way. And I will overcast this in place. I just find it so much easier on the machine than trying to deal with clips. It does need to be a nice clean neckline. And it's worth my time to do that. So that has my facing all clipped in place with those little cords tucked into those corners. So I will, as I said, just with my extra strong thread, I'll go ahead and tacking stitch that into place. Then I'm going to take it to my machine and stitch it. Now your seam allowance on this one can be about 6 millimeters. Give yourself a little bit more room. We are going to finish off right here. Then when we turn it through, it will leave just enough for us to turn a little hem under. So again, have your stitch length set to about a number 3, and you'll find it so much easier when you're sewing that fleece. You can go ahead when you finish sewing that facing in, turn it through and tuck it all under and give it a press. And you can see we've got that beautiful finish at the front and around the neckline. We will be top stitching this section, but not until we've finished everything else, because we're going to incorporate in that top stitch a hem around the base of the jacket. Okay, so let's move on to the sleeves. So with the sleeves, you have a couple of options. Because this is fleece and it's known to stretch out when you hem it, depending on the way you've cut it. I'm just going to blanket stitch that raw edge, and that's going to finish that edge off and won't have any raw edges. It's very non-fray also. If you're working with a fabric that does fray, just take that hemline up, just a small little hemline, so just a little bit less than a centimetre, and stitch across before we do anything else. Okay, so for me, I'm going to do that blanket stitching at the end when we're all done, and I'm doing all the rest around the collar and so on. So for now, we are going to go ahead and we're going to add our sleeves into place. And the way that we do that, you have a mark on the top of your sleeve here, and we're going to line that mark up with the center shoulder seam, which we have pressed out nice and flat. Now you can do this with pins or with clips, whatever works best for you, but you want to totally line up those two edges. And then you're just going to bring the other two edges down till they meet up at the side seam, and they will meet up perfectly. You won't need to stretch it or anything like that. And then I'm probably going to do the same thing and overcast that into place first. It just makes it so much easier sewing it on the machine. You can see the other side will come together the same. And then we're just going to, well, I'm going to overcast it. I'm going to overcast that into place, and then I'm going to stitch that seam allowance again, remembering that our seam allowance is 5mm. Make sure you go back and forth over your start and finish, and also that shoulder seam there. When I've done that one, I'll just repeat with the opposite side. I have both of those arms, sleeves now stitched into place. Now we're still with working on the outside of the garment. We're going to put right sides together, and we're going to sew the underarm seam and all the way down the side seams. So here's the little arm. The seams we're matching up here are the two underarm seams, and I'm actually going to just put a pin straight through there, straight exactly through the center of those two seams, and you'll see that your side seam matches up perfectly, as does your sleeve down to the cuff. Again, I will probably overcast this, and I will then stitch that same 5mm seam allowance, and then I'll do the same with the other sleeve on the other side, folding that over in the same way. My next step is to go ahead and press up the little hem to match at the bottom here where I facing pulled that up. I'm just going to turn that up all the way around, just that same measurement, which is around about, for me, it's around about 7mm, sorry. I'm going to fold that all the way around, give that a press, and then I can take this to my machine and I can sew a top stitch around the entire edge, going up around the neck and around the front, top stitching, and then that will also incorporate that hem. And my top stitch hem will probably be around about 4 to 5mm, and it'll just capture that nicely. It also will stop your facing from rolling outwards. It will keep it nicely tucked in. And then I can go ahead and blanket stitch around all of my edges, and I'm going to do my blanket stitching around every single edge. So along the back of the hem, everywhere that I just did my top stitching, and I will also go ahead and do the bottom of the sleeves, and that will complete my little jacket. So that completes basically our little cardigan jacket. Now, if you are not intending to do blanket stitching, you should have your hems turned up on the cuffs, and you can see there, that's just a beautiful little finish. Make sure you do that top stitching. If you are going to be blanket stitching, as I am, now that you've done that top stitching, you've got a lovely line to follow with your blanket stitch, so you'll be able to keep it all really nice and even with no problems at all. And as I said, I will do the cuffs there of my little jacket. Let me get that done. I do have a video that shows you up close how to sew a blanket stitch. Check that out, but most of you are pretty well versed in that stitch. Let me get that done, and then I'm going to show you, I'm going to pop it on one of my little medium art dolls, and you can see the finished result. So there we go, stitching all done, and we have our beautiful little cardigan. It's soft, it's pliable, it works with our beautiful textile dolls so well. Now you can see that I have done the blanket stitching, but if you do your top stitching, you don't have to do blanket stitching at all. It's nice to give a bit of detailing around the pockets, and of course, if you don't want to tie at the neck there, you can just absolutely leave that out. The shape of the jacket will sit folded in regardless. You could also do a little button and a loop if you prefer. So many ways that you can change this up. Now, it fits our medium art dolls in Masterclass perfectly. It's designed for that one, but it's a very boxy little jacket, and you'll find that it will fit many of my projects. Also, when you go to print your pattern pieces out, you can enlarge them before you print them out, and they will fit, particularly this one. If you enlarge this one, it will fit our large art doll. It will also fit many of our bears. So have a little play with that. You can reduce it down as well. So I'm excited to see what you're all going to do with this one. Let me just try it on one of our little medium art dolls, and you can see the fit. So I've popped that one on my beautiful little Mindy, little Boston Terrier art doll, and you can see the fit is just beautiful, and it's just adding another layer to your costuming that makes all of the difference. These look equally as good just on a beautiful mohair bear. So I can't wait to see what you'll do with this. And remember, it's very easy to alter this one by changing just the sleeve length. Simple, just to cut those a little shorter, and you'll find you'll be able to fit this on so many of your creations. So I hope you find this pattern useful, and make sure you show me all of your little creations on our Payitforward page, our Facebook page. Come along and join us. I thank you all for joining me today. I hope you had fun.